Hey, Longhorn, baby. Are we closing fast now? Yeah. Contract signed, money wise. Let's go. Woke up feeling like a boss today. They said, boy, you know we got you. Gone and do your thing.
Hey, everybody. This is Mike Hoffman, CEO of Longhorn Investments. And we are here doing another episode of our podcast. So I'm excited. We're keeping going. We didn't quit yet. We're going to call it the Longhorn Way podcast. I think last time we called it the Longhorn podcast. So we're going to be the Longhorn Way. And I'm very excited. This is the first time I have a guest who is not an employee of Longhorn Investments. So this is very excited about this.
I'd love to be.
Our first word. No. Anurag Garodia, excuse me. And he is the president of the mortgage office. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
And if you would just introduce yourself a little bit, give us a little background on you. How? I don't want to get how into you, but tell us who you are. Where are you from? Where do you live now? You married? You got kids? I like to get into all that stuff and everything about you. He's shaking his head already. I've hit a tough spot already.
Now, this is my first podcast, so I'm
awesome.
Somewhat nervous, but Anurag Garodia, I'm the president at the mortgage office, and we build loan management software all the way from origination software to servicing software to fund management. And we focus on the private lending industry with customers like Longhorn, Lima One, RCN, and the likes.
And how long have you been there?
Been there about 3 years.
All right.
Just over 3 years.
And so where were you? Walk us through where were you before that? And maybe we should go, we can go backwards instead of starting at the beginning. So where were you right before you took the job at TMO?
The latest job was at YouTube.
At YouTube?
YouTube for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
Just before joining the mortgage office.
And what'd you do at YouTube?
I was in the trust and safety team. It was more of an internal consulting role. And, I guess I can go all the way back.
Let's
grew
do
up back in India. Spent a good part of my first 24, 25 years in India.
Okay.
Went to undergrad in India, got my first job out of college, joined Google. Went through this whole rigorous process of interviewing. Guess what? Joined this team. I was very excited when I got the job because this was, a math test, an English test, reasoning test, 5 rounds of interviews. I thought, okay, made it to Google.
Wait, hold on. To get your first job at Google, you had to go through 5 rounds of interviews and take all these tests?
That is accurate, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Back then, Google was still very, very rigorous on its interview process.
Wow.
I didn't know. First job, I didn't know what to expect.
What was the job for? What were you interviewing for?
Early on, I didn't know exactly what the role was, but it was part of the ads review team. So I started off with reviewing advertisements for Google.
Okay.
Some inappropriate content, got to sometimes watch pornographic content as well, categorize that, make sure ads are adhering to policies and processes. That was my first job out of college.
And that was in India?
That was based in India, yes.
Okay.
Spent a good part of my early years doing that job. And, again, within the role, I grew. There were different roles. As part of that team, I started growing, went into a workflow management role. The one fundamental thing that I've learned from that role, there's a lot I've learned from Google, but, they hired a lot of people from undergrads. They typically went to good schools and hired people for roles that felt very, very mundane, very basic. Why would you hire someone from good grad school and put them in a role where you just have to look at content and classify them one way or the other? But what I learned was, they hire smart people to get them to the point where they're bored of doing those mundane things so that you can actually come back and, figure out a better way to solve problems. And that's kind of what I saw across the board, where that was just a starting point where you learned a lot about the advertising ecosystem. And it just so happened, each of us, we found faster ways of doing the same process, bringing in more automation, and, you move on from there. You move on to different roles. So I started off with the advertising operations team. I did a few rotations with the advertising marketing team. Spent about 2.5 years within that team.
I got a quick question on that though. So one of the things you were saying is that there was you were watching ads to that had to meet certain standards.
Yeah.
Did Google have set standards for Google as a whole, or was it country specific, different standards for different places? How did that work?
Google has a pretty standard set of policies that they put out to advertisers.
Okay.
But, a lot of these policies have interpretation behind it. A lot of this content is fairly gray. It could fall either way. Most of the ad content was automated, and only about 1% of ads came in for manual review because they were flagged for certain things, and you wanted humans to assess exactly how to categorize that. And internally, we had a lot of, had knowledge base and had a process on how do you make those calls? What should be accepted? What should be rejected? There is a human component to it. And, we were supposed to make that determination, and there were escalations, and, there's a quality process on making sure we got it right.
Okay. And so you were there, you were in that job a couple of years, moved into management, and then how long were you at Google actually?
Spent a good part of 11 years in total.
Oh, wow.
But, as part of this team, I also spent about a year in Dublin, in Ireland.
Huh.
As there's a rotation project. I started leading this project, and it was an interesting project. I mean, going back to, trying to do mundane things. I was doing this really mundane job, and I was doing it sort of well. I was very productive, but I did see these advertisements coming in from all these different languages from time to time, where your content may be in English, but the landing page may be in a different language. And I was like, okay, why can't we just translate that content? At that point, we had to route content from a different language to someone who can speak and read that language. And I was like, can we translate that and get it to English and just review it instead of having this inefficient process? And, nothing of that sort was built out. But when I took it to my manager, he was like, oh, this is not going to work out. And I cranked out a spreadsheet, did an experiment, did some manual translations, and I showed that, it's possible that'll work out. And that's the beauty of a place like Google, where they have the resources, they'll challenge you, give the resources, and let you run with the project. So I was allowed to, scale that project out, move to Dublin, get these multiple language teams together, run experiments, build a process, and ultimately, over a period of time, we were able to build a process where, Google Translate became a useful tool for us, where we didn't have to route different language content to different teams. And, that was an interesting phase.
Oh, yeah. That sounds awesome. So how long were you in Dublin?
I was there for about a year.
Okay.
So
good
it
experience?
was great. I loved
Enjoyed
it. Very diverse, multicultural.
Yeah.
It's part of the German team there. Seated with that team to sort of run those experiments, work really closely with the team. Great cultural experience.
That's awesome.
Traveled a lot around Dublin, Ireland. It was great. My first time living in a different country altogether.
What a cool experience.
And, there's no looking back.
So, okay. So then you're in Dublin, and then did you go back to India then, or where did you go?
I did.
Okay.
Came back to India. This was more of a rotation program.
Okay.
Came back to India, switched teams. I moved on to more of a sales manager role. This was supporting some of the larger advertisers in the US. It's focused on the B2B vertical.
Okay.
Where we consult with a lot of these big brands, got it. General Motors as an example.
And so you're consulting with them, trying to help them make better ads on Google to get more response. Is that what your guys' role was?
Pretty much consult them, sell them on the newest products, show them what the new products look like, what's a good way to advertise, spend money on Google,
And
get the best ROI.
Yeah. So when was this? I'm trying to figure out what time period this was. I'm trying to figure out where in the world, where Google fit in the ecosystem. Were they already the giant monster that they are now?
Yes, they were already pretty large. In fact, I was on a team that was managing a $600 million advertising portfolio, and that was just one small vertical for Google.
Right.
And this was 2013.
Okay.
I started Google in 2008.
Okay.
Moved to this team in about 2004, 2013.
And did you see a lot of, it was Google already the dominant force in 2008 when you got there, or did you see a lot of evolution and change in 2008, 2013?
Back then in 2008, I barely knew Google. I knew Google. Everyone knew Google search, but Google wasn't the company that it is today. In fact, out of college, I had interviewed for multiple different companies and was actually going down a different route. I was going to this small, analytics consulting company. Ex-McKinsey guys who had started this small company. I was pretty much bought in. In fact, I'd already made my decision to go there, but just so happened I was talking to my uncle who's based in Chicago, and respect him, his perspective, and he did tell me that Google might be a better choice, and just took on that role. They had a really good rigorous process, like I said, and seemed like a great place to work.
Right.
Turned out okay.
So you said, okay, so 2008, you've gone to Dublin, you're working your way up. 2013, you're back in India, right? Or you're working, doing rotations, you're working in the sales team and things like that. What other rotations did they have you do besides, you were doing some product management, some sales?
Advertising operations, did this whole project, which was a long project around the whole ads translation project. Did B2B marketing for about a year. That was also part of a rotation program. And then moved on to this sales manager role for the large customers. That was between 2013 and 2015.
Okay.
Right about then, I spent about 5 odd years at Google. Wanted to take a break, go back to studying. Took some time off, did my MBA, moved to Chicago.
You got your MBA and then moved to Chicago, or did you go get your MBA?
I got my MBA in Chicago.
Where'd you go? Where did you go to school?
I did Northwestern.
Excellent. Great school.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It was a great phase in life. Got to meet a lot of interesting people, had a lot of fun on the way. Did a little bit of studying, got through grades. We all have to do that.
Yeah. And so, all right, so you're in Chicago. It's freezing cold in winter. How was that? How was that adapting to that and everything? I guess Dublin, Ireland. Dublin gets pretty chilly too, right? Everything.
Ireland gets cold. And in fact, I was in Dublin this was 2011, and they had one of the coldest winters, and they weren't prepared for that. They were, they're not used to putting salt on the sidewalks.
They sound like Dallas, Texas.
Yeah,
they sound
exactly.
very similar. And you can adjust those get those comfortable for you and everything, those headsets and everything. Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like Dallas. We have no idea when it's icing, like schools close, businesses close. They put, sometimes put ice down. People don't know how to drive. It's kind of a mess. So I can see that.
It was crazy. I remember a time when, people were told not to come to the office for that week because it was unsafe to walk on the sidewalk because they had not put salt on there. They were not used to it.
So you took a week off.
Well, I was right beside the office.
So you walk, but back then people weren't working from home though either, right?
Not at all, no.
Right.
Work from home was pretty much a COVID thing.
Okay. All right, I like this. So you're in Chicago now. You got your MBA from Northwestern, and now what are you thinking of doing? Is this something where you communicate with Google and like you want to go back to Google at this point, different role, or is this you're out and you want to go do something totally different?
And when I went to business school, wasn't thinking of coming back to Google. I was thinking of doing something more entrepreneurial, joining a much smaller organization. But it just so happened that, after school, I got a good role in Singapore, which was very close to entrepreneurial. Moved to the payments team in Singapore, which was an interesting team. It was called the Next Billion User Group, where Google was building new products for these developing countries where the next billion users Google would come from. So they had multiple different products. It just so happens that the payments product is what I joined.
Okay.
They were coming. We always had Google Pay, but Google Pay didn't work as well in the developing countries, whether it's Africa, whether it's India, whether it's Southeast Asian countries. And that's the product, I was slotted in. So it was a small team, very entrepreneurial. It was, I'd say, point number 40 on
my
that
God.
team. It was very, very, Google is such a large organization where your roles are so clearly defined. If you're doing product management, you're doing product management. If you're doing engineering, that's all you do. If you're doing marketing, your roles are very siloed, but in such a small product team, you could do multiple things. Even though you're part of the product strategy or operations role, you can have inputs across the entire product area. All you care about is helping the team build a really good product, and there weren't no real clear lines of separation. There were and there weren't, and that was exciting. That's one of the most thrilling experiences I had on working on call it a small startup within a large organization, having the security of a large organization, but being entrepreneurial and being able to do things you want in a small product.
Were you guys, and I guess I'm sure they were successful, but it seems like they were able to get their next billion users is my hunch, is they were able to
looks like
to do that and everything. So how long did you last in Singapore?
I was in Singapore for about 2.5 years.
Yeah, I've never been, but I've heard amazing things. Everyone I know that's been to Singapore
I am a
loves it.
Fan of Singapore. It's a country where things just work. It's easier if it's a small country, a lot easier to manage and administer, but public transportation, public infrastructure, it's a safe country.
Yep.
Very, very well managed, very well connected, and really high, good quality of life.
So when you went there, did you know that you were going to be there for a finite period? You were going to work on a particular project for a certain time and then you were going to move on? Or was that, hey, I could be here for a while, or did you know?
I just went with the flow. I liked Singapore. I was there. It was not a finite time period.
Okay.
It was a full-time role. It could have been forever, but just wanted to come back to the U.S.
You did want to come back?
I did. At some point, I did want to come back. Also, just more opportunity. There's a role that I liked on YouTube, and just decided to move.
So that led you from the Singapore. Then you came back to the U.S. Where did you?
I moved to the Bay Area. I was in San Francisco. That was my YouTube role.
Gotcha.
It was more of an internal consulting role. Again, came back to this large organization where my role felt very siloed. Coming from that entrepreneurial experience within the payments team to this, again, small role within a very large organization, just felt like I wanted to do something different at that point, and made the switch to TMO.
And then, so that is great. So you've essentially worked for two of the largest companies in the world, right? I mean, I understand it was siloed a little bit in Singapore, smaller organization, but you still, your parent company is one of the largest corporations in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then you leave there and you go to another giant, right? And YouTube. So during that time, YouTube was huge then, right? It wasn't like they were already blowing and going, right? They're a giant company.
Mm-hmm.
So you do that for 3 years. And then this takes us to where you are today. This is fascinating. How in the world did you decide? So you've been in these monster companies, even in entrepreneurial spots, and now you decide to go, hey, I'm going to take this role. Well, first of all, did you apply for it? Did they find you? How did this even come about?
I should say this was all planned. Growing up, I always wanted to be in the private lending industry.
Yeah. Nobody growing up wanted to be in the private lending industry. That's what I've learned. Not one person ever said, you know what, this is really what I want to do when I get older.
It was all happenstance. One of my very close friends, my roommates from back in business school.
Okay.
He runs a private equity fund, and they had made this investment in TMO. And, because he was also my roommate back in San Francisco at that point, we would talk about investments and, the businesses that they were looking at. And in general, I don't like too many of these private equity businesses, but, TMO sounded exciting. All the things TMO was doing, building, it sounded exciting. And, it just so happens that, I ended up taking this role. I spoke to a bunch of customers of TMO at that point, about 30 odd customers, did my due diligence. And, the one thing that came out very clearly was just telling you before the podcast that customers have this love-hate relationship with TMO.
Okay.
Everyone has a very strong perspective about TMO. But what stood out was, customers had, a lot of these customers had left TMO at some point because the experience was frustrating. It was a small organization. It was,
Right.
At some point it was frustrating, but they all went back, tried different products, and came back. And the product worked. Product solved a very deep need for them. It worked, and I did my due diligence, looked at the numbers, felt like this product is solving a deep need for the industry. It's got some very, very solid fundamentals, very low churn rate. All the growth had come very organically, word of mouth. And that's a beautiful business when you don't have to do too much marketing and customers just, talk about your product and sell your product on your behalf.
So I'm curious, did your friend, your roommate have to sell you hard on this role? Like, was he pushing hard for this? Because I'm just trying to imagine the experiences you had and that, because look, my hunch is you never even heard of the private lending space before you talked to your friend about TMO.
Everyone knows about the private lending industry.
Come on, tell the truth. Did you know, you had any idea what it was?
Not. I had no idea about the industry. And I'm still on that learning curve. I'm still on my journey learning more about the industry. It's been 3 years and I still feel like there's so much more to learn about this industry. Every customer that I talk to, is unique in their own way.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question about it. And I love the way you said that because you said it so gently and so nicely, but in your head, you had to be thinking, and every one of these customers is different in their own unique way. Because I know some of it's really, interesting and all that, but it would probably be nice if there was a little more uniformity in the way we conducted our business.
It would make our lives a lot easier.
For a company like yours. So I'm so fascinated that you took this role coming from your background and what you did. And so you take over as the president of the company. And so what is the first thing that I'll say very little, I won't say nothing because I'm sure you knew something about it, but you knew very little about the industry. What is the first thing that, I know you talked to a lot of customers and doing your due diligence and everything, but what's the first thing you wanted to do as coming in to a space where you have no experience? What is the first thing you do as the president of the company? Like, what do you get up and tell everybody, or what's the vision? What's the goal? What did you have in mind when you took this position?
Talking to customers built a lot of perspective, but, the early part was just learning more about the team. What are things we are really good at? We'd also done a lot of work just thinking through just market fundamentals. Is this a market that's growing? How large is the market?
Well, tell us about your team. How big was your team? Because, you're used to coming from these monoliths, right? They might have been siloed, but these are giant companies. How big was your team when you walked into TMO?
We were about 20 people at that point.
Okay.
It was a small team. That was exciting. It was a small team with massive runway for growth. And, it was very clear that the team needed a lot more investment. And then it came down to what are the right areas to make those investments. What are near-term investments? What are longer-term investments? What are immediate investments that you want to unlock? So the first area of investment, we had this whole thesis that, look, it's a product that needs to make this transition to the web. It was a desktop-based product. And I had played its course for about 40 years.
Right.
We had to make investments on building a really high-quality web-based system, make big infrastructure investments that can sustain long-term growth within the product. We had about over 1,000 customers at that point.
I always wondered that. I did not know how many customers TMO had, but when you got there, over 1,000 customers.
We had about 1,100 customers when I joined.
Wow.
It's a large customer base and, very low churn rates of customers just love the product. We saw, we did look at the numbers. A customer that uses the product for over 2.5 years, 3 years, roughly, going to their third renewal, it's basically very unlikely to churn because the churn rates were 3% or less. And that's a sign of a really, really high quality product.
Yeah.
And it just came down to how can we maintain the quality of product, bring it to the web, and keep making better investments, keep making the product a lot better.
Well, tell us how it's been going. Like, I know you're making tremendous progress in getting everything that TMO does on the web. But, you know, you've got a unique point of view of it. How do you think that's going?
You know, it's going really well. Say we launched the product back in September of 2022. And I'll say we've gone through this whole journey where, you know, there was this pent-up demand from customers on wanting to move to the web product. And upfront, early on, because of the brand equity of the product, because TM was known to build really high quality product, delivered really well, customers lapped onto it. You know, there are early adopters who came on board and, you know, they were just waiting. They were just waiting for this moment of moving to the web. You know, as you know, the AWS experience that we had on the desktop product was not the most fun experience. It was a fairly frustrating experience. So customers moved on very quickly, and we quickly realized that there was a lot more testing we had to do. There were a whole bunch of bugs, a lot of bugs, and you know, some of the customers that moved to the web product were not happy.
Mm-hmm.
So we had some customers that stuck on with us, some customers who reverted back to the desktop product. But, you know, we kept going down that path of making investments, iterating, quickly fixing bugs, hiring more engineers, hiring product managers, fixing bugs, prioritizing. You know, it was interesting. There was a time we got to a point where we had to make a hard call. You know, Carlos, he's the CEO of the business. He's been there about 45 years.
Oh my gosh.
You know, he knows the product code. He's also a person who is he cares about the quality of the product very, very, very deeply, as one should. And, you know, there was a time when, because of all the complaints from customers, like, you know, Anurag, I think we got to pull the plug on the product. Let's
you mean
back
on the web bit? He wanted to pull
on
the plug.
The product. We're not ready. Let's go back. Let's iterate on the product. We're not there.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, we talked about it. We talked to more customers, and we basically came to a point where let's keep pressing. Let's keep learning. Let's keep moving, because there's no perfect product, but a good product is a function of all that feedback and continuous iteration. We kept going that path, and, you know, thankfully 2023 was better than 22. Still a lot of pain, but 24 was the year we really, really doubled down and got to a place where we have a really high quality, stable product that customers love.
Wow.
2024, all we cared about was NPS. And we saw about a 48-point gain on NPS. That's the one thing we cared about.
And NPS is?
Net Promoter Score. So we do a survey with our customers, and a 7-point survey. 6 and a 7 is a positive score, and anything less than 6 is a negative score. So the net of that is what you define NPS. So we had a positive NPS score. So a huge gain. It's basically simply saying, do your customers love
do you like it
the
or
product and the interaction with the organization? Would you recommend this product to someone else?
Right.
Is the basic question.
And I'm assuming that a lot of your customers come from referrals from other customers.
Absolutely. Referrals are still our number one source, a top source.
Yeah.
You know, it may come through our organic Google source, but you've heard about the product before. Someone has told you about the product. And, you know, no one buys the product without talking to others.
Yeah.
We're a system of record. You want a system that's reliable, trustworthy. You just don't want, you know, gimmicky software with a UI that works sometimes and doesn't work the other times. You want a system that's reliable, and word of mouth is very important to us.
Yeah. And no one is buying your software who hasn't watched a demo, right, online, has talked to multiple people, has been to a trade show, and they've probably seen you guys there at a trade show, or talked to other customers about it. Because you and I were talking about this earlier. It is a big decision, right, in the private lending space to change your software, right? So you guys have got to know that if someone is making that decision, I mean, there is a trust, a leap of faith. There is a lot of responsibility, I'm sure, that you guys feel if we're bringing somebody new on board, because this is like look, for us, the software is our lifeblood, right? We can't function without our software. So I feel like you guys feel a lot of pressure, right, internally and everything, because you want to succeed. You want your customers to be happy and everything.
Absolutely.
And so you've been there 3 years. I did not know that Carlos was going to pull the plug on you guys in 2 years on the web-based thing. That would have, there's no way you could have let that happen, right?
Yeah. I mean, we had to do what's right for the customer,
Right.
ultimately.
Right.
We would have gone through a transition process at that point and made sure we support the customers the right way. But, the decision, when we thought deeply about the decision, it was a no-brainer to keep pressing on and just make larger investments. And to the point, we've actually, a 20-member team back then, we're close to 80
Yeah.
at this point, which is a fairly large investment.
Huge.
Into the product, into the organization. That investment is what really played out.
Yeah, because
played out really well for us.
Well, because the people, that's what you need, right? Look, you're a software and you're a tech company, but I mean, the people is what makes your company
Absolutely
what it is, right? I mean, it's like, that's how you're going to grow. That's how you're going to reach your customers. That's how you're going to make your product better.
Mm-hmm.
I think all good organizations, right? The people
Absolutely
is what matters the most in everything. But that's a lot of growth. I mean, to go from 20 to 80 in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How's that been?
It's been a fascinating ride, and I'm so happy to have the team that we have. We were fortunate to be able to hire some great people, great talent, from different professional organizations. We hired folks from Disney, Green Street, Google, Apple, Facebook, PayPal. We've hired people from multiple different organizations, and that's really brought in a lot more professionalism. We've been able to build the right processes, think about, product management from a long-term perspective versus making short-term decisions. And it's been a journey. Early on, we were asking about, how we thought about investments, what was the first thing. We understood the value of the product is with our customers, and we made sure we structured our team. We had an account management team that was dedicated to our customers, learning from our customers, having a single point person, as opposed to just having the sales team that sells to new customers and then forgets about them. So we made an investment, deep investment, on building an account management team. Then we moved to building out our product and engineering team, very large investments across the product and engineering team. And then the third was the solutions engineering team. Loan servicing, loan origination can be fairly complex. Rolling out a product like that can be a very, very complex process.
Yeah.
And it was pretty clear, if you don't have the right level of support while rolling out this product, it's unlikely for the customer to have a good experience and inevitably churn.
Yeah.
So we made this call to make early investments in our onboarding and support teams and really train them. So, that was the interesting part. This is an industry where, like I said, customers have their own way of doing things, both on origination and servicing. So bringing people and training them. And it actually took over a year to train some people who could get to a point where they were very deeply well-versed with not just the industry, but our product. And they could actually handhold the customers through the intricacies of, how to do loan servicing right, how to originate loans right.
Yeah.
Help consult.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what, because I was going to ask you that. So how challenging is it trying to build a software for an industry where everybody does things differently?
It is challenging. It's not easy because, traditional thinking is you just got to follow the revenue. If a customer wants to pay a lot of money, you just go out and build things for them.
Right.
But and this is what you learn from being in a larger organization, is you just have to think about scale. Think about what your core customers want. Is the requirement an edge case? Is it unique to a particular customer, or does it impact your entire customer base? does a particular feature make the lives of your 1,000 customers better, or does it make it worse, even marginally worse? That's the lens you want to look at pretty much. That's how TMO has always looked at features, from that lens, and we continue to look at it from that lens. So we have to make very hard trade-offs, and it's typically not very easy.
That's what I was thinking. How do you guys decide? Because look, I've been a TMO customer for over a dozen years, and I get updates, right? And there's improvements and all that. But like we're like, well, wait a minute, is this going to make everything better, or is it going to make some things better, but is it going to change other things over here? Like, do you hold your breath, or how much? And I'm sure you guys do a bunch of research and talk to clients and all that stuff when you decide to make a change or an upgrade or an update or something. It's not willy-nilly done, obviously. But is there some apprehension when you put a new release out there or something out there that goes, have we thought of everything? Have we covered it all, or we understand that maybe we broke some things, but we're going to figure it out? And I mean, what is that mindset for you when you guys are releasing something out like that?
We've gone through this process now where testing is important to us. We have a product management team that'll talk to customers, ingest a lot of feedback, think about the trade-offs in terms of what percentage of the customers does this impact? Is it good for them? What's the net impact to our entire customer base? That's the product thinking. But we do have a very well built out QA team and a whole process around release management and testing and all the things that go into building product before it actually gets to a customer. So the whole QA process, a bunch of automated testing, manual testing, where we go through the nuts and bolts to make sure that when we release a particular feature for customers, it's actually working really well. And that's the transition. We know that we need to build a reliable product. It's a system of record. We can't mess this up. Our customers' business depends on our software to a good extent.
Yeah.
If TMO is not up and running for you on origination or servicing,
We have a problem.
we have a problem.
Yeah.
And we take that responsibility very, very seriously, which is why we try not to commit. We will not commit to building anything and everything for all our customers. But if we do commit to building something, we want to do it right.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that people have to realize in this space, right? It's funny, right? Because I've been a hard money lender for 17 years, right? And so I've watched an evolution of what's happened in our space over the last 17 years, right? It was very localized, very, very, a lot of small organizations, very disjointed. There was no uniform way of doing anything. To over, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, really big institutional type lenders have come into our space and everything. And so I can only imagine for you guys, I mean, that's for you to have to, for your team to have to meet the demands that vary so much from, these guys that are used to, yeah, I'll do a loan and, let me just, throw this together and do this, to these institutions that are, much more what you're used to, right? Big institutions, very, hey, this is how we do things. Everyone's gonna do it the same way, all this other stuff. I'm sure that must have been, I feel like lenders don't give you guys enough grace when it comes to the challenges that you must have in trying to answer to so many different types of folks, right? I feel like, and you're nodding your head, so I'm assuming you agree with me. That's got to be a real challenge. I mean, if you guys were just, dealing with these giant lenders, it'd probably be a lot easier. But trying to work with a whole bunch of different of us that we're all doing things different, we all have different backgrounds. I can assume that you guys could be pulling your hair out sometimes, trying to figure out how to answer all the questions to the various groups you're dealing with.
Absolutely. Going back to that consulting process.
Yeah.
We think of us as, it's a very complicated product and industry, I would say, as a whole. If you want to do loan servicing and have, do all the things that private lenders do in terms of their loan structures and how they service loans, it can get really complex really quickly. Our job is to work with our customers, consult with them, and just help them understand all the tools that we have at our disposal. We think about just building a really high quality infrastructure where, you've got an out of the box product, which can work for most customers, but the larger you are, the more of our API infrastructure that you may want to use, where we provide you the set of APIs that you can actually work on customizing on top of our product. So we do have the out of the box product, but the larger lenders will end up doing some customization to make things work for them.
Because they're used to doing things a certain way. So so they're not willing to bend as much, or they're saying, look, we'll take your product and we're going to shape it to us. Give us the tools so we can shape your product how it works for us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Absolutely.
That's good. All right. So what are the new exciting things that TMO is looking forward to in 2025?
We still have a very core goal of being one of the most reliable softwares out there. Talked about NPS. We care deeply about that. We want to build products that our customers love and can talk about and refer us to other customers. That's still important to us. Low churn is important to us. And, we've also done a lot of customer studies to figure out what's important to them. And what stands out, we've talked about this a little bit. Building reliable software is at the core. We do have a whole suite of features that we have planned, but at the core of it, we want to build one of the most reliable softwares that exist in this industry. You'll see a lot of these integrations coming out. We just launched this integration called, this insurance tracking integration with this organization called Hub Financial, very large public company at this point, but something that doesn't exist in the industry. This goes back to the example of talking to our customers, understanding their pain points, deep pain points, and just building something that doesn't exist in the industry. Insurance tracking was a big deal. Anyone you talk to, insurance tracking was such a big pain point for our customers, at least on the servicing side. And we said, we can make some basic optimizations to make their lives easier, but what can we do to fundamentally, just give them a lot of value back? So what we did was just build this integration, which was more of a set it and forget it kind of integration, where this other organization tracks and does all the dirty work that you probably don't want to do around tracking the insurance on your asset. You can just be sure that your asset is tracked and insured at any given point of time without having to send out and check with your borrower on whether or not the premiums are paid, and check with the insurance broker whether the premium is paid and whether there's some impairment on the property.
Now, my hunch is that the big clients were super aware of this and that they're hyper-focused on this. My other hunch is that your smaller customers are like, what are you talking about? Yeah. We got insurance when we close the loan. What are you talking about? But you're talking about like people, insurance expires, the loan extends, and now the loan is going on, but are you insured? And so you guys are partnering with the company to track this for all the time, so people don't have to, your customers don't have to worry about that anymore. Yeah.
And that's just one of the integrations. In general, going back to the theme of building a core infrastructure, building an out-of-the-box product, but layering with this whole integration infrastructure where we build one gold standard integration across different aspects of the entire loan life cycle, and bringing in other players. We want to give our customers the choice of integrating with whoever they want to. So in this example with Hub Financial, insurance tracking, we've built the infrastructure where we brought in one partner, but we'll also have many other partners where our customers can pick and choose. But across the board, whether it's insurance tracking, whether it's tax tracking, whether it's foreclosure, loss mitigation management, all the way on the servicing side to, loan origination is a lot about these integrations. And we've laid the infrastructure, we've laid the foundation on which we can just double down and keep building these integrations with all these different partners.
And did you have any idea how much goes into whether it's loan origination or loan servicing prior to you getting in here? I mean, I love listening to you talk about it now. You sound like an expert in the field. But 3 years ago, you didn't know much about this, right? If anything?
I want to say I knew everything, but no. I've been here 3 years and I still don't understand so much about loan servicing. I don't understand so much about loan origination. I'm still on my learning journey. Every day is a learning journey. I hope to do an internship with you at some point.
Oh, we'd love to have you.
We can, learn about your processes and learn about how you service loans and learn about how to get better as an organization.
And we would love to have you do that because it would be fascinating for you because, look, I think we would learn a lot from you too, because you get to deal with lots of different customers who do things. Everyone do things different way. And this is what we were talking about earlier. And I wish there was like some industry standard that, hey, you guys get to touch over 1,000 customers. I'm sure it's much more now that you've been there 3 years, that you guys get to look at things a little bit and go like, hey, Mike at Longhorn, yeah, this is great that you do it like this. Have you thought about maybe doing it like this? This could make your life easier. I feel like the internship, we'd love to have you longer than a week, right? We'd like to have you spend longer and everything so we could really, pick your brain because you've got to touch and really look deep into, because, other folks in our industry, because the software, like, I can't imagine. Can you imagine? I know Jerry Delgado started this company 45 years ago. What did they do 45 years ago before there was software like this to service loans? I mean, did you ever talk to them? Like, is it pen and paper? Is it, carbon sheets, the copy stuff down? I'm fascinated, like how, because it feels really complicated right now doing what we try to do. And I cannot imagine what it would have been like. Could you imagine coming into the new president of the company going, all right, we're in paper, we're going to switch to this computer thingy over here? I mean, I know the world's evolved so fast and everything, but like, where are we going next? Like, what's happening next? Like, you were at Google, you were at YouTube. I mean, these are progressive companies that see the future before any of us do. So you're trying to do that for TMO probably, right? What's next? What's coming? What are we not seeing?
Everyone talks about AI as the next big wave. I do think AI is going to be very transformative in technology as a whole. But, if I think about the private lending industry, we're still 10, 15 years behind on technology today as we stand. There's some very basic things that need to fall in place before, we just over-index on AI. Yes, AI will be meaningful and we'll have a lot of AI built into the product on some very basic workflows, but we're not at a point where AI is just completely transforming our industry as it stands today. 2 years, 3 years down the line, yes, it'll be a lot more meaningful, but as it stands today, we're just integrating the best of AI into our product. So for example, our search functionality on the product, being able to just type out, details of find me the driver's license of so-and-so. Something as simple, as basic as that.
Yeah.
That has some AI search built in where you can query the entire database. And, those are some basic infrastructure engineering, solves which have AI layered in. But, you'll see more of those AI-based functionalities integrated within the product itself.
But and I'm listening to you and I'm wondering in my head, I'm thinking, is the industry ever going to catch up? Because it does feel like we're I guess disjointed. I feel like as an industry, we're disjointed. So are we ever going to catch up? Like, I know we've made a lot of progress over the last 7 to 10 years, and I'm sure we'll make more, but it still feels like we're trailing a little bit. And I think it's because there's no industry-wide standard of things. We're all different. We all run things a little differently and everything. But I'm like wondering in my head, are we ever going to catch up? Or are we always going to be trailing?
I don't know if it's always bad to trail in the industry, as long as technology is more lenders, more customers, more of the industry adopts technology. I still see a lot of fairly large lenders that are still, doing a lot of spreadsheets and not using software the way it should be used.
Yeah.
You can't be in 2025, you can't be using people to do things technology can do more efficiently, things that people don't want to do. Manual processes, things that can be automated. Why have people do just some basic things that they shouldn't have to do?
Yeah. But you see a lot of that though, right? You see a lot of that in our
day
industry.
in, day out. It's not just, it's not the small lenders. It's across the board. It's very pervasive.
Why? Why? Is it because we're lending money? Like, what is it that I feel the same way, that we feel like we're very hesitant to change?
Yeah, we're humans. We don't like to change as quickly as technology changes us. Technology is forcing people to change. Some people just are very well versed and very comfortable with the changes. Most people aren't.
Yeah.
And you just have to have a particular mindset of being able to adopt technology and just moving on with it. And also, I also think that there wasn't a big technology player in the industry that was, sort of bread and butter in the industry that was pushing technology forward in some way. And now that's what we want to continue doing. Bring the best of frontier technology, see what makes sense for the private lending industry, and sort of integrate that and bring it to our customers and help them through the journey. Not just, hey, here's a product, make it work for you. We want to help them use the product in the right way, in an efficient manner.
So do you think that the hesitancy is because of your customers, the lenders, or the servicers are hesitant to change? Or is it that their customers are resistant to the change, or the borrowers, or they? Because I feel a little bit like a little it's over the map a little bit, but I feel like my borrowers would embrace the technology 80%. I'm not going to say 100%, right? Because I have some borrowers that still want me to mail them statements or do things like that, right? So we just say, hey, we're going to pass on that. But I'm trying to figure out who's driving the hesitancy a little bit. Is it the industry, the lenders, or is it their customers that are saying, slow down a little bit, we're not quite ready for that? Because I feel like the customers kind of want it. Mm-hmm. Like they're ready for it. Like they want you to do everything on the phone. They can do everything on the phone. They want a text message. They want just a chat. They don't want a statement sent out in the mail or things like that. The majority of them. Is that, what do you guys get a feel for that? Or I don't know, if you don't touch the borrower as much, maybe you don't know.
We do touch the borrowers. It's a little bit of both. This is where the private lending industry is so unique. And, coming into the space, it was mind-boggling to see the number of physical checks that go out.
Yes.
And how resistant customers are to pushing back on borrowers, on investors, on, automating their payment processes.
Yes. It's a little crazy, right? Like I can only imagine that you coming from the payments, working in Singapore, and then watching people that accept checks. Like, I know for us, like we tell all our borrowers that you have to sign up for ACH or we're not doing the loan.
Yeah.
Like I had one, this was the funniest. So this was probably over a decade ago. Yeah. This is like 2012, 2013. I had a borrower call me up, right? Because I took a lot of phone calls. And he said, I have all the requirements. I have a deal and I want to do this deal. I was like, great, go online, fill out our application, and we'll send you an email with some contact information. And he's like, I don't have email. And I was like, what do you mean you don't have email? And he's like, I don't believe in it. He's like, I had it, I got rid of it, I'm much happier in my life. And I was like, okay. I go, we can't do business with you. I'm like, right? How do you do that? Right? You can't do that. So I'll never. And he called me like 6 months later, and he did it again. And he wanted to fill it out. I was like, "Do you have an email address now?" He's like, "No, I don't have an email address." I go, I'm not going to stop my whole process of how we do things for one borrower. So I have to mail you everything and mail you and do this. And I'm sure you probably giggled watching so many of us like, okay, I'll do a paper for you. I'll write a check for you. We'll do this for you. Probably very foreign to what you were used to and everything.
Yeah.
And so do you think we have to do a better job as lenders in this and tell the borrowers, hey, this is where, guys, we all got to get on board. This is how we got to do things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, ACH, automated payments and so on and so forth. These are one-on-one basic things. you just got to push the borrower a little bit more, push the investors a little bit more, educate them on the importance of doing these things. And, I don't know where the reservation comes from. Some part of it is just being used to that physical check coming through. I guess educating them over a period of time.
It's funny because, I will say this as a lender that also manages a fund, I treat the two differently. I treat the borrower differently than the investor. If the borrower says to me, hey, I want to send a check in, or will you send me a check for my draw request? Something like, we're like, no, you have to be an ACH. This is how we do things. Fill out the forms, ACH, isn't it? Mm-hmm. If an investor says to me, I would like my distribution mailed to me versus ACH, we're like, okay.
Gotta suck it up. And
right. We do it. But we try to tell them because we're like, checks get lost in the mail. Mm-hmm. It's more secure this way. It's safer this way. You get a physical record. We send you an email with, record that actually went out and everything. So we try to convince them of that. And I say we're about 92% successful.
Mm-hmm. What if, what if you get a text along with the ACH saying, hey, this much money is credited? Because that's kind of how a lot of our customers end up building confidence in that process, where there's a way to just automatically send text as soon as there's a payment confirmation go through.
Yeah.
And that's worked out beautifully.
I think our borrowers would love that. And I think 92% of my investors would think it's the greatest thing ever. And then there's 8% that probably don't know what a text is, right? Or don't like to look at that. I mean,
the most fun borrowers and investors, right?
They are a lot of fun. They are a lot of fun. All right. I'm trying to think, what other things should I be covering for me?
I'd love to hear from you. Longhorn has obviously done really well, the last few years. It was great, chatting last night about, the whole story about Jeremiah.
Yeah.
On how you hired him.
No, that's
fired you and then
yes.
fired him. And
then yes. Fired him. Yes. Yeah. Listen, this has been, I'm like you in that this is an adventure for me. I had no idea what I was doing when I got into this space. I stumbled into it, and then I got really lucky meeting people like Jeremiah along the way. But what we do have in common, right? Like most of our team, right? We have about 80 some odd people. Very few of them came from the mortgage industry, mm-hmm. right? And so it's been, our growth has been really organically driven, right? We did a recent, transaction last year, which was the first time we'd ever done anything like that to grow and everything. But, we just brought people on. We thought we'd hire smart people that could, think and do stuff. And, that's kind of how we've grown this. And then for me, it was all just like imagining things. Like when I first started, if I did 5 loans a month, I'd be, that is awesome. I'm so happy we did 5 loans a month. Could we do 8 loans a month, right? And then from 8 loans a month, can we do 15 loans? I mean, and it's like, okay, we've raised $10 million. Can we raise 10 million more? I mean, this was the evolution and the progress. It was just kind of like, it was like, why can't we do something?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's an entrepreneur mindset, right?
I've really enjoyed talking to you because, you're just trying to learn new things. You have this growth mindset.
Yes.
You're getting into the details. You're one of the few people who actually goes deep into loan servicing and loan origination, and how best to utilize software, and how can we make the team's lives more efficient, better.
But you know why? There's a reason I do that, because when I first started, I was doing it all myself. It was me and my partner, and he was the front end, I was the back end. And then, if he's on vacation, I'm the front end and I'm the back end. If I'm on vacation, he's the front end. So I used to tell everybody I knew everybody's role. I could do everybody's role. I probably can't anymore. But I used to be able to do everybody's role. And so it's super important to me to try to figure out how to make the borrower experience better. I want them to go online and fill out their application. I want them to safely and securely upload their documents to us. I want their closing to be quick and efficient. I mean, these things all matter, right? Because especially in our space, there's so much, We talked about consolidation going on, everything. How do you set yourself apart? And I want to set myself apart by, I'm not the cheapest guy in town, right? And I don't want to be the cheapest guy in town. That's not what I'm trying to be, but I want to be the best, right? And, you know, I think every day, the whole goal of the organization is how do we get a little bit better than we were yesterday? And that's
Absolutely. That's one thing we share in common.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, funny thing, I was trying to get here this morning and call the Uber, and just so happened I had to look up the address, did a Google search. Guess what? You guys have about 259 reviews with 5 stars.
That's good. Hey.
Yeah.
Our producer, Michael Prager,
that's not easy.
That's
That's the mark of a really good business. And you see the comments. Your borrowers love you.
That's awesome.
It's you know, it's hard to make a mark in such a competitive industry, and you know, you guys have been doing a great job.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that, especially a man that worked at Google for a long time. And so that
it's hard to
take that.
Get that kind of customer love and those kind of ratings, and that's obviously very meaningful.
Yeah, but I mean, it's what you and I talked about. I mean, it's we want to just get a little bit better all the time and everything, right? How do we make and when I think about customers, right? This is interesting. We had our company conference last week. I'm not thinking just borrowers, right? I'm thinking about my investors. I'm thinking about my vendor partners, right? Like, how can I make you be a little bit better? Because if you're going to be a little bit better, I'm going to be a little bit better, right? And then ultimately, like my team, right? I want them, and just like you grow this team, you've got 80 people now, but you want them to enjoy their experience, right? It's not,
absolutely.
We don't want it to just be, okay, I come to work, I have a job, I need to get paid, I got to pay my bills, da, da, da. You want them to feel part of something, and you're growing something, doing something nice, and seeing those Google reviews and hearing about that. I mean, it's gratifying to everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Customer reviews, employee reviews, both are extremely important to us.
Yes.
You know, being able to bring in good talent and being able to retain them.
Yes.
It's not easy to build an organization where, you know, you train people. This is a product that takes a long time to learn. And if you hire people and if you can't retain them, you're never going to move forward. And that's the other thing, you know, been that 3 years, and that's been a big focus of mine on how do you bring in really good, really talented, really smart people, and how do you retain them, keep them motivated?
That's what I wanted to ask you. How do you do that?
You know, that's one thing I really learned from Google. Large organizations, they just have, you know, clear goals, clear, you know, incentive structures, and just, you know, you look out for people. You know, you care about people, you care about how they feel being in the organization, you give them challenging roles, and you keep them motivated.
Yeah.
You know, just be a good human being and look out for each other, and think you'll have a good team.
So it's not just, because I think a lot of people sometimes think maybe it's just pay people more money, right? But you work at these giant organizations that job satisfaction, I'm sure, is one of the huge points of people wanting to stay, right? If they enjoy what they're doing and enjoy the people they're working with.
Absolutely.
And intellectually challenged.
Yeah, absolutely. Culture is everything. You know, we're a software business. We don't have hard assets. People is the company. You know, the entire enterprise value of the organization is purely based on the people that we have.
Yeah.
And, you know, we care deeply about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed it. I've had a fun, 12, 14 hours with you. I feel like, we've had a good time.
Yeah. It feels like it's just been 15, 20 minutes.
I know. No, it was great. Yeah. Dinner last night was,
No, thank you so much awesome. For having me. This has been a pleasure. You know, it's my first podcast, and, definitely now that I've enjoyed it so much, I look forward to doing more.
You'll do more. And I want to thank you very much for being our first guest who is not already an employee of Longhorn. But, if you want the internship, we'll talk afterwards. We can figure something out.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Call up Longhorn, told them, let's make it rain. They said, boy, we got you, gone and do your thing.